Good morning. This is Duncan from RISC, and see a few people um, already joined. A couple people still getting logged in there, but appreciate you guys joining for a little run through of the 9.0 version of VTA. We've got some folks that are just starting to really use it inside their test systems, kind of some initial rollouts there, and um, getting very, very close to scheduling across the board. And like we normally do, like to get together and have an opportunity to take a look at what's new and out there. In case there are any questions, what I've done is went ahead and muted everyone that's on the call now, but I can um, keep an eye on the chat. So if you do have a question and don't mind dropping into that chat box, that's great. We'll take a little time at the end where I'll unmute everyone and we can go through specific questions as well there. So have you been on these sessions before with me? I generally start out over in the learner side of the world and then back over into back office. And realistically, there are a huge number of changes in the learner side of the system with this release. And I think some things that are particularly nice from a mobile standpoint and super attractive and user-friendly here, trying to streamline things inside the system. My standard warning is I have kind of everything turned on inside this demo system. So if you see things that you say, hey, I don't know that I've ever seen that in my system, that may be the case. We may have something configured that you don't see there. And if there is a question, like I said, by all means, please make note there. First thing, just taking a look at this learner screen that is shared here on the page where it says My Learning Portal at the top. These banner pictures are something that's new just from a user interface side. That's something that is controlled by a theme. So you can choose to have those inside your application or not. And we can also load images that are company or industry specific if there's a need there. These are just some generic ones, and I'll change that theme in a second so you can see what the interface looks like without the banner. But really very little difference except whether it populates or not there. Speaking of changing themes, one of the things that we did over the course of this 9.0 release on the learner side of the world is try to consolidate menu items. And you'll notice that my menu icon is quite different now as well. We'll take a look there. So we've done this in a number of places. One of those is with those lesser used kind of student utility kind of functions. So up, just getting started underneath Lisa's name, if I float over the little drop down option, I have things like the About Me section where I can change my own password. My mail, again, one of those functions that not as many people use these days, but is hidden away here now underneath the person, as is the change theme and log off. So if I wanted to see what this thing look like without a banner picture there, I can change over. I have another theme that just doesn't have a banner picture, and you see when I go back to my portal, it looks very much the same, except I've lost that banner pick at the top. I'm going to switch back because I like to have it there, like a little bit of color on the screen as I go through. So I'm going to bounce that guy back in there, but again, something that is an option. And again, some of those functions that were really about the person that's logged in. So, again, profile kind of items I have consolidated here under the person's name. Speaking of menus. This icon probably looks familiar to you, especially from mobile apps and more modern websites. It's called the hamburger menu for people that are in the software biz. And what it does is it expands a menu out. So instead of that larger panel menu where you have the different tiles, this is a more linear menu, again including both the icons and the names, which I always feel like makes things a bit easier to navigate. One of the important things about this menu, very, very mobile friendly. So running on a smaller scale screen, and we'll look at a number of more accessible, adaptable, responsive kind of layout items here. But again, I have my new menu. Um, if you say, oh gosh, I've got stuff here on this menu that I don't want to, expose to my learners, right? I'm not using competencies, or, maybe I'm not using things like my advisor. Those can still be hidden the same way that they could before. You can also set a fixed order. I have this particular menu configured so that I can move these menu items around. That's what the little icon is out on the right-hand side, because I want my learning portal to be at the top, and I love to have my training plan below that, and the things that I use day in and day out. So again, just um, a little bit of a change there. I don't think something that's going to hold anybody up from a navigation standpoint, but does give me the option of taking a look at those uh, uh, menu items in a more linear way, a little more adaptable. Um, Again, had mentioned that we have consolidated a lot of menu options, and one of those is my training. And this will also give us a chance to take a look at some of the grids. So if you remember in the past, many of these options, my schedule, my history, were separate menu items, my external training. Those things have been consolidated down into a single page now that is um, uh, populated with tabs going across, so I can see each of those and step through. One of the other things you may notice here, I'm going to go back to my history just so it's a little bit bigger grid for me, uh, is that these grids themselves have been updated, and I really like the functioning of these guys. For one thing, we've got some paging so I can see the different pages through my grid, or how many items are there, and stepping through if I have multiples. So let me drop down to a smaller number so I have multiple pages there. So if I'm only displaying 5 items, then I get 2 pages in my as I move through. Um, I can also do things in these grids now. I'm going to expand that back out so I have a little more data in. I have the ability to sort these grids just by clicking on the column headings. So if I want to sort by course title, or I want to sort by code, I can do that, or completion date, hours, really any item across the top I can sort by in this case. The other thing that I really like about these new grids is that I do have the option to export those. So really, no matter where I am inside the learner page, we'll even look at some of the dashboard items and in back office, having the ability to export that data back out from the grid and just drop it out into an Excel file. So it gives you a little more freedom and flexibility inside those grids if you want to get data back out. A super subtle item here is you may be able to note that underneath the those course titles, my tooltips have been updated as well. So again, a little more of a standard kind of look there. And then the other thing that I can do is, if I am running on a smaller screen, so I'm going to just minimize my window a bit there, If I expand that out, you can see that my course code column, if I come in, is going to disappear. So I have course title, I have started, I have my status still, and you see out to the end I have this little ellipse, and if I click on that guy, those columns that get hidden as I compress my screen will be able to will be displayed if I hit that kind of more information ellipse out at the end of the line, and if I continue stacking those, um, or moving that grid in, then my tabs. Let me stretch back out there. My tabs will actually stack. So my progress was there on top, and then I can see my schedule, my history. Probably easier to see now that I have a couple of those up at the top, and now that I'm on the my history side again. Once I have enough real estate on the screen, left to right, side to side, I can see all those tabs. If I do get smaller, they just stack for me there. So it's much more easy in a mobile world, working on a tablet, working on a phone, to be able to see those guys. The other thing, while I'm right here and happen to be in my in progress training, you'll see this lightning bolt out to the right hand side of the screen. That's something that you probably have not seen before. It's a new icon for us, and you'll notice there's a couple of those around. So here for this introduction to Millennium class, you see a little lightning bolt, and here on my schedule for this ABCs of LMS selection, you see the lightning bolt. What that indicates is that there's a flashcard deck that is associated with this course. And now that I'm registered for the course, or in this case, scheduled to attend the course, I have access to flashcards. You say, okay, Duncan, what in the world are these flashcards, and why do I care? Well, very similar to setting up test questions, and we'll take a look in Evaluator. We can set up flashcard questions, again, associated by areas and subjects. And area subjects and objectives for holding those questions. And then if someone wants to practice answering those questions, but not ready to actually jump in and take a test, and maybe burn up a opportunity, a single instance for a test, I can view the flashcards, and they work just like flashcards that you would have with question on one side, answer on the other side. So it's not prompting you for submitting an answer. It's really just for your own personal development of being able to drill through. But if you have an existing catalog of questions, can be valuable. So here, what are the steps to start a hurricane? And I flip that card over, I can see the answers there. If I go to the next question, what color is the start button there, and I can flip over and take a look at the answer there. So nothing is recorded in the way of right or wrong answers, so I'm not making a selection, but really just an item that gets for use for drill and studying, and flashcards, say if you ever are interested in taking a look at some of the research in flashcards and the way they can build retention and speed someone's um, ability to process information, forcing some active recall and learning there. There's a lot of science that supports using flashcards. So again, something that's new that's been added, and we're going to take a look at the way those get set up in both the course catalog as well as the questions over an Evaluator. But again, another tool that's now in your toolbox. If you're interested, the use of the flashcards actually does get recorded as XAPI data. There's a profile that actually Art, that several of you guys know, was instrumental in putting together with the ADL for making that a formal recipe or formal profile for XAPI. So again, wanted to make sure I pointed that out. A couple of the other exciting things here. One, for dashboards, dashboard functionality has really changed just a little bit, and that's largely in these controls. Really, the way that they look is updated a bit, and you guys know now if you click on any one of those dashboards, you want to drill down into that data, we've got those same new grids with the opportunity to export. So if I was looking at this and said, gosh, I've got so many requirements that are aging, I can pull that data right out and export it. The other functions, very, very similar here, right? I can change my filtering. These are all items that we've had in the past in those dashboards. One of the other things, again, it's one that you can fix for users or allow them to change, is here at the bottom there's a theme for the dashboards, and that theme is really just a color scheme more than anything else. So different color options if you prefer on those dashboards. Give them a little bit better look and feel as you go through. And we'll take a look at administrative dashboards as well there. But again, a couple new controls on that side. One of the areas that really has been enhanced in the 9.0 version are the instructor functions. And I'm going to take a look at both the supervisor utilities here and these instructor functions. So I'm going to start off with the instructor options here. And when I go to this instructor page, I get more options than really I ever have before. So here, these are the existing courses that I'm scheduled to teach. I'm logged in as Lisa here, and of course you see the items that are in my history, the things that I have completed in the last 12 months in this case. And I've always had the ability to do things like view the roster and to change the status, move that course to history. But I didn't have a lot of control over managing the roster outside of things like if I went to view it, I could send an email to the people that are in that session. But in this session, I don't have any people scheduled yet. One of the things that an instructor can now do, if they're in a class, and there may already be people on this session, and if I want to add someone new, I can add them directly to the system or to the session from Learner. So I don't have to have an administrative ID to do that. I'll grab the record here for Miss Bartz, and it says, yep, student added. And if I close there, you'll see that now she is in the grid. That grid again is exportable. And so I could continue going through and just picking out people to add to my session. Or one of the other things that you've been able to do with the the VTA remote system, if you remember going way back to printing badges and scanning those, or more recently, using the mobile apps to scan, we went ahead and moved that same functionality over into Learner itself. So if I want to scan someone into a session, I can do that. And when I use my scanner, it puts their badge number in and it adds them to the session. I say, okay, well where's that badge number come from? How does that happen? Well, we can use the internal VTA functions for either creating a barcode or a QR code so that those could be scanned in with a device that's attached to the computer, or more recently, we've actually started doing some more scanning with proximity cards. So if you have an existing badge inside your organization, we can match that badge to a employee ID that's inside VTA. Then they have a very inexpensive little proximity card reader, and a student could basically bounce that card across the top of the reader, and it would scan them into the session as they arrive or as they're leaving. So lots of options there, and there's a great blog article titled "Number of Ways That You Can Scan in VTA." So again, another option there that really does expand and enhance what instructors can do inside of the system. And again, this is with one of those sessions that's already scheduled and out there associated with me. But I can provide the opportunity to an instructor so that he or she can actually add a session themselves. And really what they're doing is going out and selecting a course, right? So they can search. I'm just going to grab this 36-month refresher for first aid. I can pick a classroom if I have classrooms populated there, and set my start and end date instead of max roster. So I don't get a full I don't get a full list of scheduled functions like I would in back office, but those necessary items to get a session out there, I can do. I got a chat question or a note that lost audio. Let's say, I looks like I am still speaking. Um, so if someone can let me know if there is audio, I'd appreciate it there. Let's set a little indicator for me. Looks like it's going, but I can. Okay, yeah, I got a couple people that say that they do have audio. All right, good, great. Then um, I will continue on there. But oh, thanks, Carol. So yeah, it could be just a connection issue. So let's say looks like just one person with a audio snafu, and just going to disconnect and ring back in. But say getting back to that instructor functionality, I can now add a class, and that's something I've never been able to do in the learner side of the world. So submit that guy, and then magically inside my grid, I have another session based on when I scheduled that class. So again, um, nice, exciting stuff inside the instructor function. I think one of the other big areas where we have some marked improvements here is the consolidation of supervisor functions into the single menu item for supervisor utilities. One of the things that in the past we've maybe been a little less streamlined on is getting to things like checklists. And now, over the past few iterations of the application, we've expanded checklists so that supervisors, well, I guess supervisors have always been able to fill out checklists, but instructors can now fill out checklists. It had been the case that I couldn't start a checklist until the student, as a supervisor, or instructor, until the student had at least accessed it the first time. Now, as long as the checklist is the next required lesson, as a supervisor and instructor, I can start it from scratch there. So if I wanted to, open up this Word beginner's checklist for Heather, I could do that and give her credit, or if it was set up to, I could give her go through each individual item on that checklist. This is also where approvals have landed, setting up delegates if I want to have someone else make those approvals. It's likely that you guys don't have not everyone has the ability to add students to the system or edit existing students, but if you did, or if you do, then those functions are here as well. And something that's that's coming in the near term as well is this ability to upload rosters. So a supervisor um, would actually be able to um, go in and for their employees, they could add that there was a training session. And again, I can go out and search for that training session. So I'm going to grab my fire extinguisher um, course again. And here, just like running reports, I can choose a student group. So maybe a department that I supervise is production, and then I'll see all those students. I'll grab the records that I want there. I could select everyone, and I could add it to the roster and submit. Now what happens then is that submitted roster goes to the administrator, to an administrator to approve. And that's why you see these request dates out here. Clearly I've been playing around with setting up some sessions, but where the instructor function allows the instructor to build a session, add students to the roster, move it directly over into history without an intermediate kind of step. The supervisors can essentially upload a roster and it will go to an admin for approval before it becomes a training history record. But again, like the fact that we've consolidated these supervisor utilities and also added, say, super minor item here, but back over on my learning portal, if I take a look at my to-do list, I can see checklists now as well, where in the past we didn't have that same option. So appreciate having having that in there. Um, Kind of final things on this learner side of the world are just some more kind of ease of use features, more nuanced features. If I look at something like my blog and say I was going to edit or I was going to write a new blog article, I have additional formatting options here at the top um, for making my blog more exciting there. If I want to take a look at any of those existing blogs that may be out, again, I can certainly go back through and take a look um, at those blogs and then include things like images to those functions. So again, a lot of consolidation. A lot of this learner portal is very, very configurable. So if you have things that you see that you say, gosh, I'd like to have this in a little different layout, then much easier to do in this new application. Of course, we don't set up any data inside Learner. All that stuff comes from back office. So I'm going to make a quick switch over into the back office side of the world. We can see where all this stuff comes from. One of the things that I'm excited about here on the back office side is dashboards. Again, just added as a menu option across the top. If you're not doing e-commerce, you wouldn't likely have that commerce option enabled there. These menu options are driven based on my security role, right? So if I don't have access to utilities, I'll just never see that menu option. But under dashboards, we have some what I'd say are base dashboards for 4 different areas of the system: registrations, activities, courses, and schedule. And my hope is that as usage increases, we get feedback from you guys as end users and coming in and say, gosh, I'd really like to look at this data in a different way and continue to build out this library. But these are really snapshot items of what's happening inside your system. So for registrations, we have things like, how many registrations do we have for self-study courses, and non-self-study courses in the same day and trend that along with course completions, right? Because I can just start something or register for a class and not complete it. So those numbers would be a little different on that side. Of course, I have a little grid at the bottom that makes a count. This one doesn't have many options, so not super exciting, but some of the others will have more options. Here I have registrations by media type. So is it classroom or is it web-based training? If I have more media, then I'd see additional options there. My no-show rate, not super exciting graph at this point because there just aren't any, it is not any no-show data there except this one. But if I change my date range, so here at the top, this slicer will change my dates for all those options down below. So here's my, you see my registrations. The bars have all gotten much skinnier, and I can also see my no-shows over time as well because I have some that that exist in that range. One of the other fun things here, you may have noticed another little hamburger menu out to the side. I can send any one of these graphs to print. I can save it as a PNG or a JPEG image. I can save it as a PDF. I can also save it as an SVG image that's resizable, manageable there. So again, the ability to create those things and export them if you wanted to email them out. But registrations under activities, we're looking at things like performance checklists versus lessons, courses, CMI interactions, which would be test questions inside, content modules, videos that get started. Again, all driven by the data and what is actually happening inside your application there. Activity by department, which I think is probably a more valuable item in my mind, where I can see how many um, uh, activities were completed by the the admin department versus the production department versus the maintenance department, and I also have the ability to do some filtering there. So if I didn't want to see this Texas Southwest, I could just apply filter and I drop those pieces off of the bar. Again, by work area. So again, depending on how you're structured or organized, you can see those activities by different work area. I have that same theme control here. So if I change to a green mist theme, it updates all of my color schemes to that to that theme. Under courses, I have again most active courses, so I can see what's being completed the most or how many registrations are happening in this case because I don't see any completions for this group. I could expand my window of time out there, and that may change that. So here I have some completions and some registrations. So you see, essentially, I have a two-way bar chart there. So positive counting in either direction, and then again, number of ratings for courses, and I can see the average ratings there. But again, all things to do with courses. And then finally, on the schedule side of the world, I can see sessions and the number of students. I can expand this time frame out a bit more as well. And now you see those um, uh, different peaks on the chart becoming tighter as it spans a greater period of time. Here at the bottom, I have my class utilization. So that's number of students compared to the class roster, and then the room utilization, the number of students compared to the classroom capacity. So again, different ways of looking at that back office data in kind of a quick snapshot. I'm going to transition over into um, Evaluator now and take a look at flashcards. The other thing, this is one that's just a personal A personal exciting win on from my standpoint is that this side menu I can now collapse and expand. So if I'm ready for a little more real estate on the screen, and I am, my eyes are old, and I have a big monitor, and I still want more space. So I can now buy a little more space by getting rid of my menu. But flashcards. Before we get back over into admin, I'll show you where those guys live in the course catalog. How do they get here? And just like tests, questions, and tests, you would set up your questions first and set up a flashcard deck inside Evaluator before adding it to a course inside Administrator. Here, my categories, subjects, and objectives. So just like setting up test questions, and if I need to add another group, that's actually where they come from. So, but generally, I feel like flashcards are going to mirror the questions that are in the question bank for a particular test. So it made sense to follow that same category, subject, and objective breakdown. In this case, I picked those areas out. Here are those 2 questions, and I'm going to just browse that guy to take a look at it. So you see, very, very similar to putting in a test question, or maybe even a survey question is more accurate because I don't have right or wrong answers there. But what's my question? What's the media for that question? What's the answer? So just as simple as that. I do have the option to preview so I can see what that looks like. It's not exactly the same, right? It's not coming up in the card that I can flip, but gives me a look at what the question will how the question will display inside Learner. And again, if I go to my next tab here, that other question that we just saw back in Learner. So again, once I have questions in a objective, then when I go to a flashcard deck and create one, what I'm going to do is just give it a name. Is it active? I can put in a description. And just like with associating questions with a test template, I'm going to go over and select what objectives to include. So here I have that technical flow station 2 compression objective. I'm not picking out what number of questions to include. It's just going to randomly cycle through all of the ones inside that objective. Again, because we're not recording scores, we don't have fixed mandatory questions or things like that. But I could here just continue exactly like exactly like an online test template and just add again another demo category and demo subject and demo objective, or carry that crane operation, and now I get those questions in. But again, they are a separated set from your actual test questions. They're flashcard questions. And then to associate those with a course, I'm going to go back to Administrator. And if I take a look at my course catalog, and I'm just going to open up my business supervisory subject. Oh, very quickly there. What I'm going to do is grab this leadership course. I'm going to do it for a couple reasons. I'm going to use as examples here. But if I open up this course here towards the bottom of my base course information, right? So after my min students, maximum students, I have a place where I can go in and select that flashcard deck. So if I want to have a flashcard deck associated, I can do that. It's right there at the bottom of the kind of general information about the course, right above the option to choose course forums. For those of you that have not seen this new requirements option as well, I think this is a great benefit for administrators, especially if you have multiple administrators inside an organization. This lets me go in at the course level now, and if I say that this is an annual course, and it's always going to be a priority one, and we're going to give people a 30-day grace period. Again, doesn't really affect anything from a course catalog side because the course catalog doesn't control due dates. But when I build a new requirement, those functions will copy over. These fields will copy over, so they'll be the base or the defaults. Still, I can change that as an administrator when I do set up that requirement, but it gives me a starting point and the chance to be consistent. Because if you're anything like me, I have more than once set up a list of requirements associated with a job title or a team and gone back through and thought, oh, I got one. When I run a list requirements report, I'll see that I have a 12-month refresher frequency, a 12-month refresher frequency, a 36-month refresher frequency, and then I'll put a 3 in and I'll miss the 6 and realize, oh nope, I need to fix that. Well, here, if I can set a base in the course catalog, it reduces the chance that I'm going to run into that problem. The other thing that I wanted to point out here is a super exciting function that we've been working on and actually had a great big rollout at the end of last year for spaced learning. So you'll see a new media inside your application for spaced learning as you go into 9.0. And if you choose that, then it gives you some more options on the lesson screen. Backing up just a half step, say you've likely heard a lot about microlearning and mobile learning and trying to get content out to students. The real need here was client driven. So we had a group that came to us and said, gosh, we do this leadership class, and over the course of time, we'd like to really break it up into 18 4 or 5 minute sections that people can take on their phone. But I don't want them to sit down and take, all this content at once. I want to give them one module a week, and I only want it delivered Mondays through Thursday. And they can't get module 2 until they've completed module 1. And if they don't take module 1, I'd like to send them a reminder. So how do we get that content delivered? And we did that with this spaced learning function. So if I pick spaced learning, then what happens when I look at my lessons is I have the option of setting a time span between those lessons. So if I open up this lesson 1, it says it's available 0 days after the previous required lesson because it's lesson 1. There's nothing that comes prior to it. If I go to my next lesson, lesson 2, says it's available 7 days after I completed the previous lesson. So take lesson 1, 7 days later, I'll get a message with a link to lesson 2. And then lesson 3, again, I set up the same way. So how does this work? Well, it works through either email or as a text message if your content is XAPI or CMI5. So if it's something like SCORM is going to require you to go to the LMS to launch that content. So it will send an email. I'll have a link inside that email. I can click on it and go into my content there. If it is an XAPI or a CMI 5 course, I can do the same thing. It will send out an email. It can send out an email with a link to that lesson, but it can also send out a text message, because one of the nice things about XAPI or CMI5, which is really just built on XAPI, is that my course can launch without the LMS, right? SCORM is a standard that requires the LMS to be in play, where XAPI doesn't. So go to my email templates here, and if I am going to, oh, did I get you? If I'm going to add a new email template for a space learning course, watch what happens to my screen. I end up with two boxes here. So if I want to send an email, I can create that message the way I always have, right? Dear first name, words, 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 and then I can hit my go-to learner link, right? So that's going to send the email to your first name, and then here's a link to the content proper. For a text message, I can do the same thing and say, here is my, oh, you know what, I'm going to do this one completely without using the, without typing. I'm just going to use the text. So I'm going to say course title, lesson name, and then my link back to the content itself. So again, the only time a text will go out is if one, it's been configured, right? Because it's required to get that piece set up if that's something that you're interested in. But it will send out a text link as long as it is an XAPI or CMI5 course. If it's not, it will use an email message. But again, the ability to get that email that says, hey, Duncan, here it's time for you to take lesson 2, here it's time to take lesson 3, and I can bounce right through those. And really we can use any of our standard lesson types there and spread that time out. So from the standpoint of reinforcing training over time and following up after a class, I know a lot of people have said, gosh, you know, I'd love to send out an evaluation or a another test, say a week, a month, 6 months after a course, and this gives us a way to do that now, so we can force some timing in between. There are a couple other things that touch this function. So if I was going to look at, I'm going to cancel here since I'm not going to save that template. But here in my utilities, if I look at my mailer settings, just like in the past, we've had the confirmation notes and exception notes and those things going through. There's now an option for a spaced learning note as well. And the real difference, or the real you know, exciting piece of this is it gives me a way that I can say, you know what, I don't want to send people text messages for training on, you know, Saturdays and Sundays, or maybe not Fridays either, because they're doing, you know, work a 410 schedule or something there. So I can set those up, again, make my default text, and then if the message type won't allow me to send a text message, it will default to an email, or if a student doesn't have a mobile number in their student profile. I say went through that piece without pointing out. You guys have probably seen those fields, and you may or may not have those populated inside your application now. But if I open up Richard's record here and scroll down, there is that student mobile phone number, and that's where that's the number that we'll use for sending a text message if it's populated there. So again, most ways to get those functions set up. Just two more quick things. I know I'm getting close to the top of the hour for everybody and want to give a little bit of time for questions. One that's a very minor item, but something I want to make you aware of is in schedule or in history, it really does not make a difference if I'm looking at a roster. I'm going to go ahead and open up a course here. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up a half step there, and oh crap, yeah, I'm gonna use that session, sorry. So I grab my session here, and if I take a look at the roster, In the past, I've been able to edit a record like this, and I could just, swap out Richard's name with someone else and would update that item. Can't really do that anymore because of the way that the learning standards have changed, and again, specifically XAPI in this case, where I can't um, delete data essentially. So what I can do now, if I hit cancel, is if I want to make a change to that roster record, I would need to move it to a canceled status versus just changing the name, and that's just so that there's a record of that change that gets recorded and it's consistent across both the learning management system and the learning record store. The other thing that's a little bit unique on this screen now, a new change, is if I want to add someone to my session, and I'm just going to grab Ben Franklin there and hit OK. If a prerequisite is not met, then I get the option to enroll or not enroll. And if I enroll that person, it will make an entry into the enrollment log, so I can always go back in and track if someone overrode the prerequisites and added someone directly to a session. So again, kind of the big back office changes there. There is one other report from a course report standpoint that's had a major overhaul. If you remember the old course catalog report, you really had two options. You had a summary or a detail. I don't want to grab all my courses, so I'm just going to pick my business area and add those courses to the selected, because really the difference in this case is with the what tab. If I go to that what tab, instead of having just the, do I want summary or detail, I can now go in and pick which information I want included. So do I want prerequisites? Do I want lessons? Do I want instructors? Do I want the credit hour breakdown? Do I want links to the documents and the cost and the competencies, notes and description and target audience, schedule information, admin details? In this case, I'm going to grab everything. So I'll grab, make it the most detailed course catalog detail report possible. And now when I hit OK, you'll see this crazy colored report that breaks down each of those areas into a subset or a grouping. So now, just like the options listed out there in the on the what tab, here's those additional details: administrative details, course review details, requirement defaults, enrollment default or details, schedule and charge information. Oh, unpopulated description, outline, and objective. Always hate to see that. But instructors' cost, prerequisites, lessons, hours, documents, competencies. So again, really can include, especially with a course like this that's actually populated, all of that information, so I can see it one time. These are the competencies that are supported by this particular course called Employee Handbook, and what those defaults are. So again, probably the biggest report change that's inside the system with this new version. Again, excited about it, and we are getting folks into the application now and testing out, and we'll be contacting folks about upgrades in the near term. In the meantime, let's see, I don't see any questions offhand in the chat, but if you do have questions and want to drop them in the chat, or if you want to unmute, I do have what is that, say we're about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, and I'm glad to answer anything I possibly can. Oh, you guys are far too quiet. All right. Well, if you do have any questions or thoughts, concerns, things you'd like to ask about, you can always reach out to us directly, VTA support at risk-inc.com. If you have anything that needs troubleshooting answers on there, and we are always glad to assist. If you're not reading our blogs, all of this functionality gets pushed out very, very heavily in the blogs, also on the RISC Twitter stream. So if there's new information that you're looking for, always a great place to check. And as always, it's your feedback that helps us continue to get better. So always, always excited about your input. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much, and I will make this recording available in the next day or two. And then if you do have other folks that need to catch a session, we will be rerunning this session on next Tuesday at 2 o'clock Central. So glad to have anyone join that that you want to recommend. So thank you much. You guys have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.